Faith is an important concept in Christianity. Most Christians know that faith is the conviction of things not seen. Unfortunately, many have a false concept that faith is not based on fact. They think faith is something people just happen to have. If you ask them how to have faith, they will say you just need to have it. That is an incorrect concept of faith. Luke 5 illustrates that while faith is believing in something that has not happened yet, the basis of that belief is things that have happened in the past. In the 4th chapter of Luke, we read that Jesus went to Capernaum, taught on the Sabbath, and cast out demons. The news about him spread to every place in the surrounding district. Large crowds gathered around him, seeking relief from various diseases. One day, Jesus was standing at the edge of the lake while a crowd pressed around him. Jesus got into a boat, put away from shore, and taught the people while sitting in the boat. And let's pick up reading at Luke 5, verse 4. And when Jesus had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." Jesus said this as if they were certain to catch some fish. Verse 5. Simon answered and said, "Master, we labored all night and caught nothing, but at your word I will let down the nets." And when they had done this, they enclosed a great quantity of fish, and their nets began to break. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat for them to come and help them. And they came and filled both of the boats, so that they began to sink. It would have taken a massive amount of fish to make the boats start to sink. Verse 8. But when Simon Peter saw this, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Get away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." Think about Peter's reaction. He did not rejoice about the great success, nor did he thank Jesus. Instead, his first instinct upon grasping the reality about Jesus was to recognize his sinfulness made him unworthy of being in the presence of Jesus. Many people today have the idea that when we get to heaven and see Jesus, we're going to shake his hand, thank him for being Jesus, and then stand around and chat. Peter's reaction indicates we will act very differently. I think it is likely that when we get to heaven and have crystal clear vision of who Jesus is, we will feel totally unworthy of being in his presence. We will be ashamed of who we really are. Verse 9. For amazement had seized Peter and all his companions because of the catch of fish which they had taken. And James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon, were also likewise amazed. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not fear, from now on you will be catching men." And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed Jesus. Peter, James, and John were so amazed at the power of Jesus that they left everything and followed him. This is an example of faith because they left behind their means of earning a living. They believed Jesus would provide for them in the future. Some people have the idea that faith is a blind, irrational belief based on nothing. That is not what happened here. Peter, James, and John did not know how Jesus would provide for them, but their trust that he would do so was not just wishful thinking. Jesus had just provided perhaps the greatest catch of fish in their lives. They had proof that Jesus could provide anything at any time. Their confidence that Jesus would provide in the future was based on the fact that Jesus had demonstrated an ability to meet all their needs. Verse 12. And it happened that while he was in one of the cities, behold, there was a man covered with leprosy, and when he saw Jesus, he fell on his face and begged him, saying, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." And Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, "I am willing, be cleansed." And immediately the leprosy left him. And Jesus directed him to tell no one, but go and show yourself to the priests and make an offering for your cleansing, just as Moses commanded, as a testimony to them. Notice the phrase, as a testimony to them. The religious leaders were opposed to Jesus. However, Jesus was not telling people to ignore the Mosaic law and the temple system. He encouraged the leper to follow the law in order to prove to the religious leaders that Jesus was not trying to undermine the sacrificial system. Verse 15. But the news about Jesus was spreading even further, and large crowds were gathering to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus himself would often slip away to the desolate regions and pray. Our lives are busy. There are many demands in our time. However, just as Jesus made it a priority to pray, we need to make Bible study and prayer a priority in our lives. We simply have to take the time to do it, no matter what else is happening around us. Verse 17. And it happened that one day Jesus was teaching, and there were some Pharisees and teachers of the law sitting there who had come from every village of Galilee and Judea and from Jerusalem. and the power of the Lord was present for him to perform healing. Jerusalem was at least 70 miles or 110 kilometers away. Some cities in Judea were even further. Some of the Pharisees and teachers had traveled for 3 or 4 days to observe Jesus. Verse 18. And behold, some men were carrying on a stretcher a man who was paralyzed, and they were trying to bring him in and to set him down before Jesus. But not finding any way to bring him in because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and let him down through the tiles with his stretcher into the middle of the crowd in front of Jesus. And seeing their faith, Jesus said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven you." Jesus recognized their faith. Some people think faith is something you just happen to have. They believe faith is not based on fact. However, the men who lowered the stretcher through the roof did not do so based on some random idea that maybe Jesus could help them. They knew Jesus could heal the man because of everything else Jesus was doing in their region. Faith is not blind hope or wishful thinking. Faith is believing Jesus can and will do something based on his promise to do it and his previous actions that prove he has the ability to do what he promised to do. Verse 21. The scribes and the Pharisees began to reason, saying, "Who is this who speaks blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" They were correct that only God can forgive sins, but they were wrong about Jesus committing blasphemy because Jesus is God. Verse 22. But Jesus, knowing their reasonings, answered and said to them, "Why are you reasoning in your hearts? Which is easier to say, 'Your sins have been forgiven you,' or to say, 'Get up and walk'?" It was easier to say sins were forgiven because it was not possible for anyone to prove the sins were not forgiven. On the other hand, it was harder to tell the lame person to get up and walk because if the person had not gotten up and walked, then there would have been proof that Jesus did not have the power to heal. Verse 24. But, so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, Jesus said to the paralytic, "I say to you, get up, and picking up your stretcher, go home." This story illustrates the purpose of miracles. Healing people is how Jesus proved that he is God. In this case, Jesus healed the paralytic to prove that he has authority to forgive sins. Verse 25. And immediately he rose up before them and picked up what he had been lying on and went home, glorifying God. And astonishment seized them all, and they began glorifying God. And they were filled with fear, saying, "We have seen remarkable things today." Some people think faith is something people just happen to have. If you ask them how to have faith, they will say you just need to have it. However, the men who lowered the stretcher through the roof did not do so based on wishful thinking. They knew Jesus could heal the man on the stretcher because of everything else Jesus was doing in their region. As Christians, we have faith that in the future Jesus will take us to heaven to spend eternity with him. Those convictions regarding what Jesus will do in the future are not just wishful thinking. Instead, they are based on actions Jesus performed in the past. Thanks for visiting Bible Mountain. If you have already joined my email list, thank you, and please tell others about Bible Mountain. If you have not joined my email list yet, please do so now. In order to join, go to BibleMountain.com, click on subscribe, and that will take you to a page where you can sign up. Your email address will not be sold nor given away. Once again, thanks for visiting Bible Mountain.